Welcome to the Friday edition of One's World. And on Tuesday of this week, I took a relatively long bicycle ride up from my apartment to an area, first of all, around the old railroad tracks that I'll talk about in a minute. Then up into the area a little north of that, and then I journeyed more or less west until I came to a couple of pagodas and out into the countryside. And I want to just emphasize the different kinds of living situations in these three places. We're going to start with the houses around the railroad tracks, and then we'll work from there. So let's get started. Alright, well, what you can see here, I'm going to cut in between two images here of the road itself along the railroad tracks and the housing and businesses along the railroad tracks. You can see that, first of all, they're very poor, and the road itself is very poor. You can see the surface here. I mean, it's just stones and rubble, and I couldn't even really ride my bicycle along it. People do ride motorbikes and cars along it, but it's hard on a bike, so I walked along here. And I'm curious about this whole stretch. This particular railroad has two branches. The main branch here is going from north central city, that is, not exactly in the center of the city, but just a little bit north of it, to the airport. And before COVID, this was a regular run. People could arrive at the airport, cross over the parking lot to the train station and wait for a train, and then could get the train into the city. Took a while, obviously, and you had to wait for a train to arrive in the first place. It wasn't a very comfortable ride, but it was possible. And back in those days, once in a while I would get stopped at a level crossing somewhere. Sometimes it would be at the airport itself, and it was a kind of curious route. It came out of the airport and went west for a little while, and then went north for a little while, and then went east, and eventually came out in the center city. Well, this part here is the part going east. And it's fairly long, I suppose about 5 or 6 kilometers, the eastern section. And it's lined with relatively poor dwellings and businesses, much the same as you find in other parts of Sensok, which is the Khan, just north of where I live. Pretty much the same, you'll get fruit and vegetables and soda and cigarettes and all that. But overall, the living conditions are poor. So then we strike north out of this area, and we end up in what is more or less like middle to low income housing. Is the best way to put it. I mean, not absolutely dirt poor like the area around the railroad tracks, but pretty poor, and more or less a rabbit warren of housing and businesses, and most of the people here work somewhere else. Well, they have businesses here selling food and whatnot, but most of the people have jobs elsewhere, so they commute out in the mornings. And I'm just going to take you a little way around. I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time going from road to road. Just want to show you. And one of the things about this area that I find notable is that there are no pagodas here. If you wander around the center of the city or any of the main thoroughfares, you'll come across a pagoda fairly quickly. You don't come across any in this neighborhood, and that's one thing I need to investigate. Like, why is that the case? Is it because the neighborhoods are too poor to support a pagoda, or what is the case? Anyway, I wandered around this area for a little while just to give you the impression of it, and also just to remark on the fact that Phnom Penh does not have suburbs as such. Cities in Europe, in North and South America, have suburbs, places that are away from the center of the city, that are mostly housing. There are some shops and other conveniences and government offices and so forth, but by and large they are residential. They're what are sometimes called dormitory suburbs. That's when people go there to eat and sleep after the day's work, and then get up in the morning and go back to work. They commute into the city center. Don't have suburbs here as such. The difference between the various districts is more or less a financial. You know, they're very rich areas like Tol Tok, and extremely poor areas like along the railroad tracks that I just showed you, and then various ones in between. And so this area just north of the railroad tracks is in between. So I went north a little bit and then struck west. And this is not a route that I've taken very often in recent years, although when I first moved to the apartment where I live now 4 years ago, I went up here quite often. I was, however, limited by the fact that this road that we're on now was not very well paved. You can see that it's very smooth now. It's made up of a surface of reinforced concrete. There are two possible road surfaces. There's bitumen or tar macadam, tarmac, which you see on the majority of the boulevards. And the side streets sometimes are tarmac, but mostly they're reinforced concrete. I'm not sure why. I'm going to have to investigate that. It may be it's cheaper than tarmac, but tarmac is certainly easier to lay. The reinforced concrete takes a long time because they have to lay down a mesh of steel rods, and then they have to pour concrete on top of that. Then they have to smooth it, and they have to cure it, let it dry, and so forth. It all takes a very long time. Whereas macadam surfaces can be laid by machinery, and that can be done fairly quickly, and by the next day it's ready to go. So Not sure. It may be in part because the machinery for laying tar macadam cannot get down some of the smaller streets. That's an obvious possibility. But this street I'm on right now is very wide, and you can see like there are trucks passing me, big trucks, just like on a boulevard. So I'm not sure what the deal is, but it was 4 years ago pretty rough in places. I had to get off my bike a couple of times because it was too rough to ride on. Now it's all smooth, it's all easy going, and I went just straight west. And what I was aiming for was a pagoda. And it's a pagoda that I happen to be familiar with from 4 years ago. It's called Krain Tnung, and I think that's the name of the Sangkat. I'm not sure, I'll have to check on that. Anyway, it was sort of a surprise when I first started riding my bicycle out here to come across, because there's so few pagodas out in this area. Once you get outside of the center, you have to really hunt and peck to find a pagoda. So I found this one and did a lot of photography here and so forth. So I decided, okay, I'll just go in and take a look. And what do I find? There's a grassy verge and cows taking a rest. This was the part that I really wanted to emphasize about this particular video, is that once you get, let's say, I'm going to say 5 kilometers away from the center of the city, it gets very rural. It's not suburban, it's meadows with cows and goats grazing, or it's rice paddies, or some other form of agriculture within the city boundaries. Like you've got the city center, which if you're a tourist, that's where you go and you'll see the palace and the Independence Monument and the river and all of that, and you think, yeah, this is a city. You won't come out west, or south is another possibility, and find people fishing in the rice paddies within the boundaries of the city. That's what makes it special to me. So we've got these cows just taking a break in a pagoda, of all places. So I journeyed on, and you go mostly west up to this point, and then the main road curves north. So I journeyed on north a little bit more. There's another pagoda that I'll maybe just show you a little bit of here. But then once you get past that pagoda, it's open fields, it's meadows, and you've got cows grazing. You normally have goats as well too, but they're not in evidence at this point. But if you look around here, you see there's a couple of cows having their lunch, and then you span over the horizon, and you can see the center city way in the distance. It's maybe about, I don't know, 6 kilometers away, something like that. That's the nature of Phnom Penh city. It's very modern, very crowded, very busy city center. A lot of middle to low income housing around the center, spreading out. Like in some parts of the outer regions, there are some very expensive houses. Maybe because the land is cheaper out there. They're dotted in between residences that are low to middle income, and then you get out into the outer regions, which is in the west, in the north, and in the south. there's just open fields, and it's extraordinary. Not to the east of the city centre, because the city centre butts up against the Tonle Sap River and the Mekong Delta, so you can't really get out into into the same kind of rural environment going east from the city centre. You can, but you have to take a boat across the river first, and then it gets very rural very quickly. But otherwise, to the south, to the north, and to the west, you are out in open country very quickly. All right, well, that's my musings on Phnom Penh City for a Friday. Please tell your friends about my videos. Please like, please subscribe, and have a good weekend. I'll be back on Tuesday. I think I'm going to be doing a little bit of political philosophy. Take care.